Good Sunday morning, everybody. On the greatest day of the year, we're back on standard time. Welcome to the Sunday morning Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Your place to go to get all the rock salt you need, and they got tons of it, and the lowest prices anywhere in the New York City tri-state area and beyond. And also all the great snow melt products like Pelledo, Mag, ice pellets and flakes, and snow blowers, shovels, anything else you need to get you through the winter. 631-756-1125. OmniTrueValue.com is the website. And wholesale holiday lighting by Giannini is packed with Christmas stock to make your house the best decorated house on the block. And they're open today until 3 p.m. They're at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst, New York. They're your complete holiday lighting specialist, meeting all your decorating needs, whether you want your home decorated for the holidays or this is your profession. You decorate homes for the holidays. Give them a call or go over there at 162 Ocean Avenue in Lindenhurst, or you can head on to the website, which is liholidaylighting.com, and you can see a sample of all the wonderful things that could be sitting on your front lawn this holiday season. 631-957-5106 is the phone number. So I woke up this morning and I had a terrible night's sleep last night because I made the mistake of having a small chicken sandwich around 9 o'clock last night because I really didn't have much of a dinner, and I spiced my food up, so it got to me. Anyway, I woke up at 1:30 and thinking, oh, good Lord. Now, is it 1:30 the old time or the 1:30 the new time? Because if it was 1:30 the new time, at least I, got through an extra hour before I woke up. And sure enough, I I grabbed my phone, I went on Tropical Tidbits, and half the European was out. So we were on 1:30 new time. It's like, rejoice, rejoice.
Well, I've got so far as a few minutes ago, 84 hours on the new 12Z GFS, and I'm sure that before we're over said and done, we'll have the whole GFS to gawk at, Joe. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
Everything is in an hour earlier now.
Yeah, and that's also good at night because we'll have the 18Z will be out before the show starts, and it'll be all fine and dandy. So I guess we should just really quickly remind everybody that if they didn't see Friday's show with the great long-sleeved Lonnie Quinn from WCBS TV Weather, you can go on there are links all over the place. If you can't find it, really, it's on my YouTube channel, Joe Chaffee. Just go to the Joe and Joe Weather Show playlist, and it will be right there, all previewing your adventures to the bottom of the earth. Actually, that's what we should call it, Joe. Voyage to the bottom of the earth.
Yeah, I guess you could say. And I was thinking the other night that I have been as far south in my life as 30 degrees south latitude. That was back in 1986, and I was chasing views in South America of Halley's Comet and Easter Island too. I said to myself, I've never been any further south than that. And look at this. I'm going to more than double that in this trip. There will be a day or two when our exploration ship will actually be below the Antarctic Circle, and we will actually be in the throes of the midnight sun, 24 hours of daylight. And I got to tell you, it's kind of weird when you're down there, because when you're as far south as that, we're so used to when we wake up in the morning, we see the sun rise in the east, peak in the south, and set in the west. But during this cruise, the sun is going to rise in the east and then peak in the north and set in the west. So instead of moving from left to right, as we are so accustomed to seeing it up here, down there, the sun is going to be moving from right to left, and it's kind of going to be kind of strange, I think, to be dealt that, not just for a day or two, but for 14, 15 days. It's going to be down there from the 30th of November to the 14th of December. And I'm just, shaking my head saying this is going to be a really interesting
Yeah,
trip.
then when it
And
gets
again, we're
when
going
it
to try to,
gets then
and
it
we're
gets
going
slow to the
to,
horizon, doesn't it? It looks like it's. I've seen time lapses on David Attenborough's Planet Earth, the time lapses of the daylight over the Arctic, and the sun looks like it bounces off the horizon. It looks like it's going to set, and then it gets down to as far low as it can get in the horizon. It looks like it bounces. It just goes back up again.
well, it's going to be interesting in the days leading up to the midnight sun effect. The sun is going to set in the west, and then it will drop on down and be probably, oh, excuse me. It's going to set in the west, and it's going to be dropping on down just below the southern horizon. It will take a long time because it's setting at such an oblique angle for it to drop below the horizon. And then it's going to be, literally just below the southern horizon. It will not be above the horizon, but the area of bright twilight will be concentrated in the south. And again, it will never on any night get completely and fully dark. And on those days, just immediately before and just after we go through the midnight sun effect, there are going to be They're going to be nights when it'll look like, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes after sunset or just before sunrise. It never is really going to get dark. And I said to Renata, I said, I wonder how this is going to affect our sleep cycle.
But
Because
you're gonna need blindfolds.
or just pull the shade down over the windows in our cabin. But you talk. One of the things that people were talking about, and I got into a discussion with on Facebook about, some places that want to have daylight time all year round.
Oh.
And one of the and I point out to them, I said, it's going to get so dark in the wintertime. Like as we saw in 1974 here in New York, the sun doesn't doesn't rise until after 8:30 in the morning. And it only took a year or two of that for them to say, that's it, we're not doing this anymore. And now all of a sudden, after, how many years, like 40, 50 years, the new generation of politicians who either don't remember or weren't around when that happened are saying, let's go on daylight saving time year round. Stupid. I forget the name of the person, the philosopher or whoever, who said that those who do not, those who are destined to, uh, in
Are
essence,
to not learn
make
the
make a
lessons
mistake,
of history are doomed to repeat it.
to repeat it. That's correct. Yeah.
I always put it in this way. I would just say that every generation tries to avoid the mistakes that their parents made, and they wind up making the mistakes that their grandparents made.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
pretty much how. Listen, because of where I am longitude wise, I'm only about not that far really. I don't know, about 150 miles from the central time zone. So my sunrises here up until today, of course, getting the hour back, my sunrises here were close to 8 o'clock a.m.
Wow.
Okay. Now my sunsets are are later, but the sunrises are not till like I would start to see the dawn, the light of the dawn be about 7:30, and I don't like to take the dog out while it's still pitch black because God knows what creatures are out there lurking about, but now I got today, getting the sunrise, the light of day, now back before the 7 o'clock hour. It seems a lot more civilized. But yeah, it's the same thing. It doesn't. What difference does it make? It's the same thing. It's the same amount of sunrise to sunset. It's the same amount of daylight. Sunset to sunrise. It's the same amount of darkness. So I've advocated that we all should go to a standard time like Zulu time, and just everybody will just have to just get you need what you probably would need about a generation of people to get used to something like that, and then go and then it wouldn't even be part of the conversation. But we're so mind programmed to think that midnight is midnight, whereas if it was Zulu time, midnight would be 7 p.m. now. So, you can't win, Joe, but we got the European for the next 4 months coming out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and 1 o'clock in the morning. So at least on those snowstorm threats, you're going to get it at a slightly more reasonable hour, and we do mean slightly more reasonable, at starting at 1 a.m. as opposed to 2. The chairman.
I realized also that for that 1 hour that we here in the Eastern time zone, went back or converted back to standard time. During that 1 hour, the folks in the Central time zone were still on daylight time, and they were basically observing the same time that we observed, 4 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time. Um, and I said to myself, for that 1 hour, half the country was on the same clock. We had the same time as Chicago,
Right.
and also at Minnesota and Dallas. It's kind of weird. It only lasted again for 1 hour because when Central Time went back on Standard Time, they went back to their normal longitudinal
Right.
observation of time, and everything more or less, righted itself. But I think it's great, and I noticed, Joe, that there are more than a few politicians who are trying to push fervently for year-round daylight saving time, including I think two or three who are down in Florida, and a friend of mine who lives down in Florida who hates daylight saving time said, "What do you know?" He said, "Some of our local guys down here want to push for year-round daylight time." As I've always said, and this is what he said. He said, "In Florida, it's not so much the heat; it's the stupidity."
Yes. The chairman, Scott Briller, has a hitting super chat this morning. Thank you, Scott. And he has a question about the how much does the temperature drop during the peak of a total eclipse of the sun?
Well, Scott, that all depends upon when you're going to have totality. I've had a few total eclipses happen around sunrise or sunset, and when you have totality at that low altitude, the temperature really doesn't drop all that much. But I can tell you, and I was in Turkey for a total eclipse of the sun in 2006. Sun was high in the sky, and somebody with a thermometer measured right after totality ended that the temperature had dropped within a very short span of time, something like 20 or 25 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So again, it depends. It depends upon well, John, I mean, you can understand if the sun is high and near the warmest part of the day, and especially so if you're in a climate that's dry. If you're in a humid climate, it won't drop quite so much. But if you're seeing the sun high and it's dry, and all of a sudden for a few minutes there's no sun, the thermometer is going to react very sharply, very quickly, and also an interesting thing is that during totality or right around totality, the wind springs up. There's a breeze that picks up for whatever reason during that few minutes. So even if you don't have a big drop in temperature, the wind that picks up maybe 5, 10 miles an hour from hardly any wind at all may cause a little bit of a chill factor. So it always seems that it gets chillier right around the time of a total eclipse. It's a most interesting phenomenon. And again, as I said on Friday night with you and with Lonnie, before you leave this orb, before you die, this must be on your bucket list. You must see one of these. It's one of the most amazing sights that you will ever see, and probably the greatest natural spectacle that you will ever experience. And that's why, as I also said, after literally moments after totality ends, the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, "Oh my God, I got to see another one of these things. I got to see that." Which is why we have so many people now who travel around the world. And I said, "I'm just a piker. I've only," he said, "seen 12 of these things." But there are people who have a lot more time on their hands and also probably a lot more money who have seen 15, 20, 25. And again, my one of my best friends who I've known for over a half a century, Dr. Glenn Schneider, we grew up in the Bronx. He has made it into the Guinness Book of Records as the one person who has seen more of these than anybody on earth, 35. And he made that proclamation to me when I was with him when we were like 16, 17. He said to me, he says, "I don't know about you, but I'm going to see every one of these until I'm dead, until I die." And sure enough, he has done that, except for two cases. One in 1985, he wanted to go to Antarctica, but he couldn't get an icebreaker. He couldn't get an
Well, yeah.
icebreaker to get himself into the
Okay.
totality path. And
That's
then last
that's
year,
understandable. I mean, you don't want to show out. You don't want to go out there on a rowboat with an ice pick.
right? And then last year he couldn't go because of COVID-19. There were a few people who actually made the trip and took a chance in spite of all of the restrictions or whatever. But he was a little bit more knowledgeable. He said, "I'm not going to put anything on the line. I just had my daughter, married. He's been in good health." He said, "I'll pass this time." So he's missed in the last 40 or 50 years. He's missed like 2 out of 37 or whatever, which is amazing. But I tell all of you who are watching on the chat board now, you must see one of these, and you will have your chance in April of 2024. We have a total eclipse that's going to run from Texas right up straight through the Ohio Valley and into New England. And I don't know any other way to bring that zone of total eclipse any closer to you. I mean, look, here in New York, Joe, all one has to do is to jump on Interstate 87, drive straight up for about 3.5 hours on the Northway, and once you're about 100 miles north of Albany, you will be in totality. And I know that one of our
well, I'm sorry, in 2020, when in 2024?
April the 8th. It's a Monday.
All right.
2024.
Too bad it wasn't.
And it's going to go over such wonderful places, Joe. Here you finally have a reason to visit Buffalo, Syracuse,
yes,
Plattsburgh, Watertown. And if we are luck, probably we'll get into a situation where there'll be lake effect, and during totality, Buffalo will be will be experiencing the sudden darkness that falls.
Yeah. All right, let's check out what's on the satellite this morning as we move into the middle part of the day, and we still have this Gale Center sitting off the North Carolina, South Carolina coast. You can certainly see the well-defined low-level circulation. This is not a tropical system. There's not a whole lot of convection around it, which is, usually is a telltale sign that you have something tropical. And some of the high clouds, and this was the one issue I thought we might have today. Some of the high clouds have streamed northward into southern and central New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania. New York City, Long Island, southern New England, kind of on the edge, is a little bit of renegade cirrus that's run up. But other than that, it is a really nice day from Maine. Just move away from the coast where the cloud cover is, and you go from Maine down through the central Appalachians into the interior southeast and right down into Florida. Got down to 49, I think, this morning in Orlando. We haven't done a poll in a while, and we didn't do a poll about who's going to get to the 20s first. Well, it turned out to be a tie because you got to, what'd you say, 29 this morning for the first
29.
time? 29 this morning for you, 25 for me. 25 this morning was the low at beautiful downtown Blairsville International Airport. Where the
do you actually have do you have one of those maximum thermometers right at your house?
I do not. I was doing it, I was taking the reading actually here at my house because on mornings like this when it radiates, it actually is better. You're going to get lower temperatures as you get closer to ground level, as your elevation goes down, if you're in some kind of a valley. So being elevated, my low here actually was 29 at where I live. But the airport got down to 25. I mean, there was frost everywhere. Yeah, 25. I'm sorry. But there was frost everywhere, all around. But it's a gorgeous day otherwise. And now this Gale Center. One of the things that's happened is, of course, with this low pinned off the southeast coast, the temperatures haven't really been able to bounce much. I mean, they've come up a little bit, but they're not bouncing higher. I mean, I'm running here 15 to 25 degrees below average yesterday and into this morning. Now, we're probably going to get up to about 60 or low 60s this afternoon. So already at 10 o'clock, it was already up to 51. So, temperatures do bounce higher. But once this low pulls away, that's going to allow for some warmer air that is now in the Great Plains and moving into parts of the Midwest. Some of that warmer air is going to come eastward. But the only issue is that it's going to be short-lived, and we've got another front coming through tomorrow, Tuesday night, that's going to bring a high down from eastern Canada, and that's going to it's not going to bring the temperatures down very much, but it's going to keep a lid on how warm it will get until the next real cold front comes through, and that's going to be sometime later on Friday.
Right. It looks like dry weather now for a number of days to come, and again, not until Friday with that next weather disturbance that we will be dealing with any sort of precipitation. So we've got a nice stretch of weather, and after today, it looks like the temperatures are going to moderate tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday, and for Veterans Day on Thursday, it looks like up here we'll be looking at temperatures peaking in the low and mid 60s, which again is not crazy warm. I remember last year we had record-breaking or near record-breaking warmth for the month of November. In fact, I think it was an all-time warm month, the month of November of 2020. But this year, it's not going to get crazy warm like we saw last year, but still it's going to be nice after what we've been through, especially these last 4 days with below normal temperatures, to see near or above normal conditions for a little while. And it'll give a lot of people like yours truly a chance over the next several days to catch up with things out of doors.
Yes.
And take place, clean up. The leaves are finally beginning to drop, though, Joe, because, the cold weather, finally, these leaves which have been hanging on for all of this time are beginning now to feel the effects of the cold weather. And so my lawn is beginning to fill up with leaves, and I need to take care of that. Need to get rid of those leaves in the days to come.
I want to, two things. I just want to acknowledge Robert Russo hitting Super Chat this morning. Thank you, Robert. Most appreciated as always for hitting the tip jar. And Leon Probitsky also tossing in some coin into the tip jar, the Super Chat tip jar this morning. Thank you so much, Leon. I'm sure you'll be doing your Sunday video, and I'll be sharing it on my Facebook page later on today. Just a couple of notes, though, from the standpoint of what's been, weather-wise with the frosts and freezes. It's just astounding to me. I stumbled onto a conversation, and I mean, this goes to how your mind and memory works. And this, of course, being these are folks that are actually younger than you and I, which as every day passes, becomes an increasingly larger majority of people. But complaining over the fact that it's never been this cold, this early, this is ridiculous, et cetera, until, the old grandfather here had to point out that actually, if you look at the long-term average, we're probably running at least across the Northeast, running at about 2 weeks, roughly, I would say 2 weeks behind schedule as far as when the first temperatures go below freezing and you get your frosts and freezes. But and also, by the way, since the world doesn't revolve around, each individual's axis, I can tell you, at least for here, I mean, temperatures here have been, we've had a cooler than average October, and we're having a colder than average November by a significant amount so far, albeit that's only 7 days into the month. So it really, the location. But here's an interesting point. Here's an interesting little point. So the chairman sent me a thing about days over 30, the first freezes in New York City. And what was really interesting to me was the fact that it seems like it runs in cycles. Okay, so this is not the first time that we've had a stretch of years where the freezes have come late. All right. Apparently, if you do a dot plot, I didn't bring the chart up, so I can't bring it up to show you. But if you bring up the dot plot from about 1969, 1970 till about 2000, okay, during that 30-year stretch, the first freezes were occurring sooner than they have been in the last 20 years. Okay, now let's look at that same time frame. When you look at the period from 1969-70, right, to 2000, those were that 30-year stretch in New York City. The average snowfall in the winters that would follow those first freezes were the lowest 30-year stretch that you can find in any of their records. Now that we've gone from 2000 to 2020, where the freezes have been occurring later, on average, not every year, but most years have been occurring later. That's also corresponded with snowfalls that have been much above average. So I get my point is you can't really look, and then you go back. If you go back before 1969, you'll see similar things occur, the similar pattern. So you can't really you can't say that cold coming in sooner during the autumn months leads to X outcome in the winter months. That's my point here. Just because the first freezes have come a couple of weeks later than average, there's no correlation between. I mean, if anything, you might want to argue and say, well, you know what, that may mean that we'll have a better chance for a snowier than normal winter, because that has been the signature for the last 20 years. Late arriving frost, late arriving freezes, but snowier than normal winters. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's just no need to, at this early stage of the game, there's no need to say, oh my goodness, it's been so warm lately, and only now we're getting cold. We're not going to have much of a winter. You can't do it, as you just mentioned. You can't judge. You cannot judge a winter book by its autumn cover.
Yes, that's very good.
Like that?
Write that down and trademark that. Mike Whiteley has tossed some coin into the super chat tip jar today. Thank you, Michael. Most appreciated. We appreciate everybody's support here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. So let's go to the watches and warnings. By the way, I do have I do have interesting observations regarding the longer range, which we're going to talk about before too long. But across the country, you see the purple, I guess that's purple, off the Carolinas and down in the ocean. Those are all storm warnings. You have gale warnings along the coast because this storm system is still out there, as we showed you on the satellite. Much of the nation really on the quiet side. Out in the west, they're getting another round of seemingly endless rain from Northern California northward up to the Pacific Northwest. And we do have various winter weather advisories and even a few winter storm warnings that are up, along with a number of high wind warnings and wind advisories up for the Sierra Nevadas and Northwestern Nevada and up into parts of Oregon. So for now, all the action is there. It's basically along and off both immediate coasts, and everybody else in between is doing okay. And as far as the radar is concerned, checking this out, we still see there's actually some rain just off the southeastern coast of Virginia and extending down off the North Carolina coast. But this is the first time in several days now that the solid rain that's been here has basically moved on out, but still dealing with a lot of clouds. And of course, the Northeast, bone dry on the radar, except for what you see on the coast. The radar's bone dry going down into Georgia and for pretty much through most of Florida. Getting a little bit of precip there up from northeast Nevada, northeastward into eastern Montana and into northern North Dakota. Also a little bit of precip on the light side in the northwestern lakes. And of course, there's rain up in the Pacific Northwest with some snow up in the mountains. Ken Musillo hitting a super chat today. Thank you, Ken. Another hit to the tip jar. And congratulations, by the way, on your daughter's wedding. And the weather held out quite well. And we wish her and her husband all the best in their future together. Now, SPC.
You got to understand why I'm laughing when you said I just want to congratulate you on your lovely daughter's wedding. I remember in the 70s, David Fry, who did a dead-on impression about Richard Nixon, he was doing a skit about Richard Nixon meeting with the Godfather.
Yeah.
And here's Richard Dixon saying, and that scene at the beginning of the movie where everybody's coming to meet the Godfather on his daughter's wedding. Nixon says, "I just want to thank you, and I want to congratulate you on your lovely daughter's wedding, and I brought you this gift." And David Fowler is also doing the Godfather's voice. Says, Don Corleone says, "Oh, how nice, a blender."
Oh, good Lord. 2 points on what I was mentioning before. Chuck Cardillo says winters seem to linger longer. We've had measurable snow in May for 5 years in a row up where he is. Now, granted, Chuck is 3,000 feet up in the Catskills, but still, that's late even for them. And Adam Lowe pointing out Siberian snow cover growth this season in October has been very subpar, very subpar. But they've been playing catch up. And East Asia now getting hit with snow. Beijing got hit with, in China, got hit with early season snowstorm. And, there's some correlation with what goes on there and what, eventually may happen here along the East Coast. It's not a hardwired rule, but, you kind of try to grab your clues where you can. SPC has no organized severe thunderstorms forecast for today, and I just have to put this up because it's been forever since we've seen this, Joe. For tomorrow, no thunderstorms are forecast anywhere in the U.S. from coast to coast and from border to border. And for Tuesday, this is the period for Tuesday into Wednesday. No thunderstorms are forecast from coast to coast and from border to border. I can't remember the last time we've seen this. I mean, even going back to last winter, I don't remember seeing this. But it's been a while.
That's even rarer than when you see WPC during the wintertime and they have their map for 4 inches, at least 4 inches of snow, and that's blank from coast to coast. That's very difficult to get because, again, usually even up in the high terrain areas, they do get a bit of snow. But this having no thunderstorms, no convection anywhere from coast to coast, probably is even more infrequent, even rarer, as you just said, than the at least 4-inch, snow amounts. It's amazing.
Yep, exactly. WPC's rainfall forecast for the next 7 days. Now, for us, for much of the East, it's not going to be until the end of the week. So, from that respect, you've got 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches across a lot of New England. 3/4 of an inch to an inch or so down to North Carolina and into the Tennessee Valley. Lesser amounts as you head down toward Florida. Dry from central Texas westward to Southern California, and then you start to pick up precip in central and Northern California on the order of 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, and still some big amounts up in the Pacific Northwest, where you see several to many inches being indicated for coastal northwestern Oregon and on up into Washington State. So let's go through the teleconnections based on the 0Z run from last night, where we have a lot of volatility there in the members, Joe, after about the 13th or 14th of the month. So in another week or so, you got half the members going positive, and this has been like this for a couple of days now. And I've noticed that the spread's getting wider. You're getting, half the models go positive on the North Atlantic Oscillation and start to go above that 1 standard deviation from the mean. Then you got half that are below the standard deviation and negative. And in fact, there's one member that goes 2 standard deviations below. So apparently the models are having some difficulty, at least from the standpoint of the members of the ensembles, figuring out where this is all headed. And the PNA, kind of the same. Probably more models are neutral to positive than they are negative, but you got a couple of them that go negative by over 1 standard deviation of the mean, and the others are mostly about half a standard deviation above the mean on the positive side. So really no big changes in terms of what the models are doing, but they're just that spread is getting a little bit wider. So we're going to look at the new GFS. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, Joe, I want to look at the old GFS upper air, and then we'll look at the new GFS because I think that'll be instructive.
Are you looking at the 6Z?
The 6Z, which had snow here early next week, not this coming week, but the week of the 15th. Yeah, we're looking at that one. So let's look at this, and then we'll look at the new one, and just play out what's going on. Now, through all of that with the teleconnections, the flood weather, I don't think posted a new East Pacific oscillation chart. I'll check in a minute. I'll check in a little while whether he has. But here we are in the east, of course. You see that little cutoff low that's east of North Carolina. That is the system that's out there. Now, by the way, it's probably not impossible that as it goes further out to the east, if that circulation holds, that maybe it becomes, subtropical, but who cares? It's all, it's all going away anyhow. But, it's kind of a flat.
Does anybody know what the name? Does anybody know what the name would be? Because we went to Rwanda.
It's I think it's Adria, Adria, or Adria, Adria. That's the first A list. So we go into this flattish ridge, and there's a shortwave trough here on Wednesday that runs from Hudson Bay to western New York. So we do have this weak cold front that's going to be coming through here. Meanwhile, you do have this continued flow from the Pacific into the northwestern part of the Pacific, but it's not. The bulk of that trough is down along 160, and I always like to see troughs at 160 because that usually tells you if they, if it winds up staying there, that you're going to have a trough somewhere in the east and probably somewhere between 80 and 85. And we do have a bit of a, the flow is there from Canada. It's not particularly strong behind the first shortwave, but it is there. So our EPO, our East Pacific oscillation is probably, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. It's probably neutral to maybe slightly negative, and we always want to see that EPO negative if you are looking for cold air. So that Pacific energy that comes in, and you see it there off of just north of Vancouver, or actually not a rather fair distance north of Vancouver, comes in, and then you get this trough and cutoff low at the end of next week, and that low, upper low, deepens as it goes into the Great Lakes. So it's going to swing some rather important energy here, bringing a front on Friday. And now the trough axis is pretty far to the west, so it leads to the question of whether we're going to have, some secondary issues on Saturday with the front lagging behind, lagging a bit, stalling, and then having to wait for another wave to come up. This would be for Saturday. So I know Sal Bellandino would be right now is already, cringing over this. But once that lifts out, now here's where the night runs were kind of interesting. That lifts out, that trough lifts out, but the upper low is still sitting there over James Bay, and there's another short wave right here that comes down and around and actually sharpens up quite nicely as it reaches the East Coast sometime next Monday, a week from Monday. And this is, you're going to have some cold air around. So if this were true, if this were to verify, you're going to wind up, maybe this would result in the first snows for some areas. I'm going to just be conservative and say well inland. The trough stays in the east all, now we're into Sunday and Monday here. There's that second sharp trough that swings around and goes into Canada. You get a brief ridge, and then the trough wants to come back into the eastern United States again in the longer term. I'm not sure whether the GFS on the operational run is correct with what's going on in the Pacific, because the ensembles don't really support this. But this was what the runs were doing last night. And I think this would argue, looking at this would argue for, on Thanksgiving week that we probably will see eventually some colder air. I'm going to bring up the 6Z ensembles because it's this.
Are you alluding to cold turkey? Are you alluding to cold turkey, Mr.
Yeah,
Chiappi?
Of course I'm alluding to cold alluding to. I'm not alluding to anything. I'm saying it. Yeah, look at the ensembles, Joe. I was kind of I've been watching these the last 3 or 4 days, and it's kind of interesting how going forward, and I think this is the new one. Let me go to the old one. I got to get used to the times now because if we're switching at this time of day now, the new stuff's coming in at the same time. But I was looking at the ensembles going into from the week of the 15th on, and it does look to be on the coldish side, especially going into Thanksgiving, the weekend before starting the weekend before Thanksgiving and going into Thanksgiving week. You've got below normal heights in the east, above normal heights in the west. Got a nice flow there from Canada. I mean, this is not a warm look for Thanksgiving week, if this is correct.
Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. Well,
Yeah,
bundle up.
yeah. The other thing we should look at before we go to the new run is we've been watching the polar vortex, and one thing about looking at the atmosphere, the models at 10 millibars, you really only have one feature. So it's not like you have a bunch of upper lows running around so that as you go through time, there's more and more variability. You only have one feature. And the ensemble position here, Joe, on the polar vortex is it completes that shift that started last week. This is going back to Friday. The polar vortex now tilted north-south. The center migrating southward toward Greenland and northern Canada. And going through on the ensembles, Joe, it just kind of stays in this sort of stretched out position with troughing that runs down below normal heights down into the northeast and across the Great Lakes and the plains. This is not an unfavorable setup of the polar vortex in the stratosphere. We're not seeing it wrapping itself up into a tight little ball and confined to just the Arctic regions. It's spread out. It's not. It's a little. It's getting a little seasonally stronger, but it's not really getting particularly strong. You want to see the polar vortex to be on the weakish side, and that looks like, at least based on the ensembles, it would say that is going to be the case as we go through the rest of this month. So interesting view from that respect. Now let's look at the new. Let's go to the surface. Did you see the 6Z run at all?
I did see the 6Z, and yes, I have compared it to the new run, the 12Z, and well, I'll just keep my mouth shut and then let you continue to move on with
Well, no, I
this.
mean, go ahead. Since you already looked at it,
I
go.
mean, well, I mean, it's for those of you who are snow lovers and got all excited, and the snow geese were probably honking last night with the 6Z run, and you're saying, so, oh boy, we finale. Well, you're going to stop honking when you see the 12Z. That's all I'll say.
Well, I'm looking at the upper air, and there's a significant difference here on the upper air, and that is,
Right.
remember, you got that lead. I'm waiting for the maps to load. Okay, so this is the Friday night, Saturday system. Okay, so that is going to lift out, and then we talked about that there was a second arm, a significant second arm that comes down. The GFS is much flatter with this, and it would just argue that you would probably get something that would form offshore and move out to the east, and we would just be basically cold and dry. And I think that's that's certainly a possibility. If you don't have a sharp second trough to come around and sort of dig down into the Ohio Valley, then you're really not going to get very much out of this. But the European last night, interestingly, was actually deeper than the GFS was, so I'll be curious to see what that does today. But the European has not exactly been the soul of reliability over the last couple of months. So, I've been kind of leaning to the idea that the GFS has been actually performing a lot better as a whole than the European has. But looking at this upper air, again, if you don't have a sharp trough that drops down to our west, you're really not going to have room for much of anything to happen. And that's what the 12Z run does today. You see that eventually pulls out. So later next week, you get another one of these flat ridges, just like we're going into for the first part of this week. And then here comes the next one moving into the plains. That'll set us up for the weekend before Thanksgiving and anything else that winds up happening beyond that. So, quick look at the surface. Now, I thought, by the way, that trough for Friday night, Saturday might be deep enough that maybe we could wind up seeing some thunderstorms, perhaps Friday night when the cold front comes by, and maybe even a period of heavy rain. That seems to be the signature of the way things happen around here lately. We're dry for 2 weeks and then it pours rain.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. Are you there?
Am I supposed to say something at this point?
I'm asking you about the next one for Friday into Saturday. Maybe some thunderstorms when that front goes by.
Well, that's certainly a possibility. Again, the temperatures through much of this week are going to be, at least in our neck of the woods, above normal, and certainly at the frontal line. And it looks like it's going to have a good shot of colder air behind it. Clashes with that milder air. There could be a scattering. I'm not saying anything about severe, but there could be a scattering of thunderstorms or cells of convection that could accompany that. And that would be interesting considering how quiet the next few days in terms of convection are going to be. So we'll see. I like how it turns into a comma, Joe, as it gets closer to the eastern seaboard, as that low crossing the Great Lakes intensifies, matures, and really winds up, becomes a stem winder, if you will. And the result is that the associated front kind of bends forward like a bow or a bow wave, and again is expected to move on through by week's end. And then the big question is there some kind of a wave that will develop on that'll move up along the front? And that's the wave that last night all the snow lovers were getting excited about, because it looked like we might have some snow by next weekend. But the latest run doesn't quite show that. In fact, it shows that the temperatures will probably be just a tad too warm for the white stuff, and we may end up with more rainy than snowy conditions.
For Saturday, that's rain. No, that's clearly rain. It was a question of whether there'll be a third system behind it for Monday into Tuesday, which comes around from the Great Lakes. And again, it's a flatter look on the GFS, but it does pick up on the idea of, it has shown this on the long range, then it kind of lost it a little bit. Now it's gone back to this idea, and it makes sense. If you're going to take a low that far left up into Minnesota, where they're going to see their first accumulating snows in northeastern Minnesota out of this and back over to parts of the Dakotas, if you're going to take a primary low that far north, and you'll notice the low doesn't really get out of the way very quickly, it just kind of rotates around. That's because it's waiting for the upper trough to move on through. So the front on Friday stalls out overhead, and then you have to wait for more new energy to come along, and that's what it does. So we've got the rain lingering into Saturday before it finally gets out, and then it's cold and dry for Sunday and into the first part of the week of the 15th, and then we go through it all over again with another cold front maybe late next week, because again we're going to go into this flattish ridge, so we'll probably warm up for a day or two and then wait for another front to go by at the end of next week, and then it turns colder. By the way, we haven't really mentioned this, but this morning, in case you weren't following it, and if you weren't following it, well, it's way out in the middle of the Atlantic and not really doing anything, but Wanda is no longer finally made post-tropical as of 3 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on Sunday. So actually, they made this post-tropical last night. So I'm really behind the curve. 35 top winds are 40, moving northeastward, merging with a frontal boundary, and likely going to maybe get that whole, whatever that merges into, winds up going into Ireland and England and Scotland down the road. But it's a minimal system, and I don't really think it's going to be. I mean, I didn't really look, so I shouldn't say. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, we have two tropical depressions going on, and one of them is pretty far south. Tropical Depression 18E is at 8.2 north. It hasn't even broken 10 north yet. It's been around for a couple of days. 8.2 north, 101.4 west, moving west at 14. And a new depression has formed today at 13.7 and 113.7 west, moving west-northwest at 8, and it's expected to be short-lived or short-lived.
I think it's short-lived. I think that's the preference.
Okay, so I'll defer to you on that. We'll make it short-lived. So let's come back to the full screen here, the two of us. Let's do a little Briller Jeopardy. I don't know. Do you have? Actually, I have it. I have one. Hang on one second. I'm going to sneeze.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Gesundheit.
Thank you so much, and I accept the blessing with humility and grace. Oh, Timothy Veltman. God bless you, Timothy Veltman. Timothy Veltman has the EPO for us. I just wish I had had better eyes. I'm looking at the dates here. All right, so the 15th, that looks like a 5, 17th. Okay, so let me bring this up. So here's thank you, Timothy. All right, let me bring up the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation. And you see how it goes. You know, it's actually running positive at the moment. Took its dip. I'm trying to follow the dates here. Okay, so all right, so we're positive, just one standard deviation positive, takes a little rise as we go through this week, then takes a dip negative, then goes back a little positive, then it downtrends from there to, you know, almost 2.5, almost 3 standard deviations. The green is the ensembles, by the way. So let's use that, use the green line. So it goes negative and strongly negative as we move into the latter part of the week of the 15th. Then it starts to trend higher as we head our way, you know, gets to the neutral line around the 22nd or so of November, and then it's slightly positive. You know, there's enough of other things going on that could mitigate that, so it's slightly positive. These were on the recent ensemble. So Timothy Veltman, thank you for that. You've done a good deed today. You've got us the EPO because you know that I can't survive without it.
And what would you do without people like Timothy Veltman or any of the people who are on the chat board?
Yes.
It just goes to show. It just goes to show you. I mean, we are not the experts that all of you claim that we are. We sometimes we come up short, and we need certain tools. And lo and behold, you folks on the chat board come and help us and provide us with that, with the tools that we need to make these forecasts or make these interpretations about the future. And yes, Joe, we both are aware of the future because the future is where you and I, like it or not, that is the place where all of us are going to spend the rest of our lives. Yes. In that unknown place where we cannot tell what is to come and what fortunes await us until we get there, until it no longer becomes the future, but will be instead right now, baby.
And by the way, that was... I just went back. Tim not only sent me all the models. That was actually the Canadian ensemble. This is the this is the GFS ensemble, and those are much more negative. I mean, look at. I'm not sure. The blue is the control run. The control run goes 6 standard deviations from the mean negative. We know that's a little bit exaggerated, but the ensembles basically go negative in a couple of days and stay negative right through the next 2 weeks. It kind of gets back toward the neutral line, but that's the extent of it. And this was the Canadian, which we just looked at. Let's see if I can go back. This is the GFS. Here's the European ensemble. A European ensemble follows the GFS, the ensembles, to an extent. But here, too, the European ensembles around the 15th, 16th go negative, and they stay negative right through the rest of the forecast period. So the EPO is in what I would describe as a favorable position in the longer term. probably taking us into the end of November and the beginning of December. So if we don't get a shot for something between now and then, rest assured, if the teleconnections hold their own, it is my never to be humble opinion that we are going to see our first snow once we get into when we get into the month of December.
Yes, and things. Well, we've been alluding to this now, haven't we, for the last week or so?
Yeah.
That as we get into the second half of November, that things are going to start acting up again. So be prepared, folks, because it looks like that is going to be the case.
Absolutely. All right. So let's see. Just want to make sure I got everybody. Mike Whiteley, Ken Musillo got his on the super chat. The chairman got his. Robert Russo, Leon Probetsky. Okay, so here we go, Joe. So here's the question. It's one question today. All right.
Okay.
Within 10, how many people have been born in Antarctica?
All right. How many people have been born? Well, if you're a woman and you are a certain number of months along, I don't think you'd be allowed to go to Antarctica. So the whole process would probably have to take place literally on Antarctica. And I mean, after all, there are going to be days when it's going to be kind of boring and you can't go outside and you want to warm up a little. I'm tempted to say 0, but it must be some kind of weird number. I'll say 10.
11.
11. You see? All right. So those 11 people were bored.
Yeah. Exactly. 11 people have been born in Antarctica.
Can you imagine how unusual for those 11 people when you look on the birth certificate and say, place of birth or where you're born, Antarctica? That's about as strange as in the movie A Miracle on 34th Street when they asked the age of Kris Kringle and he said, I'm as old as my tongue and a little older than my teeth.
Good God. All right. So, all right, we're coming up on the lunchtime hour, which on the old time, it's really 1 o'clock, which means I'm hungry. So we shall wrap it up. Just want to say, though, real quick before we do, Joe, you and I both worked with Joe Moskowitz back in the day at News 12, and Joe passed away a couple of days ago, and it's very sad. I remember he anchored the morning show for a few years while I was still doing weather when I was on the mornings, and when you work side by side with folks, you do tend to get into conversations, and Joe and I would always get into we always get into political conversations. He would. I would tease him and I would tease him and say that he was left of Mao, and he would tease me by saying that I was to the right of Attila the Hun. But the common thread for both of us was the fact that we and this is sorely lacking now these days, but we were able to have these conversations as friends, and that it speaks a lot to how how things have changed over the years. As I know, if you're in the workplace now, you don't even dare open your mouth because you're going to wind up in some trouble. But that's another conversation. But my point is that he was a terrific guy. Wonderful memories of him working with him side by side. A great professional, really knew his sports and knew his football. And I can remember when he was so excited about the fact that he was going to be a dad. And because if I remember the dates correctly, I was having my my 4th child at that time. So he's going to be sorely missed. And I had been conversing with him back and forth over the last number of months because talking about starting a podcast, and I had given, I reached out to him and gave him a whole bunch of information about how he could do it and wouldn't cost him very much, et cetera, et cetera. So he was excited about that. I'm not sure if he ever got it off the ground or not. I had actually invited him to come on when he was ready, so that we could promo it, and he never did get to do that. So he will be sorely missed by myself, and I'm sure by you and many other folks. He was a terrific gentleman.
During that time, I filled in at News 12 about 300 some odd times from 1988 to 1995, and for a good number of those, I worked with and sat next to Joe Moskowitz, who, as the Jewish or those in the Hebrew faith would say, a really good person, a really great guy, one that you could converse with and one that you can really get along with, is a minch. And Joe absolutely was a minch. He was wonderful. We had lots of funny conversations, lots of serious conversations as well. And the last funny thing, Joe, sad thing also, is the last thing that Joe and I had together on Facebook a few weeks ago. He was questioning me about something in space and astronomy. And I passed along a letter that I had gotten from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Dr. Tyson had sent me a letter congratulating me on my long tenure and affiliation at the Hayden Planetarium here in New York. And I said, Joe, take a look at this. And I sent him the letter, copy of the letter, and he sent back a very short notation. He said, that is seriously cool. And that was the last time that Joe and I got together on Facebook. But he was a great guy, and I was stunned. I mean, you were the one who broke it to me that he passed on a couple of nights ago, and I was absolutely floored, because I sometimes will go on Joe's Facebook page, and I think he had he was also somebody who would be very self-depreciating.
Yes.
And he was making light of something or of himself using a certain term or name. And Ted David, who was another mutual friend of ours, who was at News 12 at one time and has been in the business for a long, long time, Ted David said, I'll bet, Joe, that you and I are the only two people who know what you're making an allusion to. I never knew what it meant, and I just chuckled. I said, "Oh, that's Joe Moskowitz." And a couple of days later, you came on and said Joe passed away. I still can't believe it, but still a great guy, a big loss to all of us who knew him. And Joe, wherever you are, I know you've taken a good trip, a safe trip, and we'll meet again, sir.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. All right, folks, have a great day. And we'll see you tomorrow at the usual time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, Mr. Rayo, Eastern Standard Time.
Yes, not 8:30 daylight time.
Right.
Or else I'll be very late.
Exactly. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.